Broadcasting live from the Business Radio X studios in Phoenix, Arizona, it's time for Phoenix Business Radio, spotlighting the city's best businesses and the people who lead them.
Welcome, everyone, to Project Management Office Hours, the #1 live project management radio show in the U.S., broadcasting to you today from the Phoenix Business Radio X studios in Tempe, Arizona. I'm your host, Joe Puzz, PMO Joe. And for the next hour or so, we'll be talking project management with our special guests. Also today, very excited that we are introducing a new sponsor. PM Master Prep will be sponsoring our show, and we're so thankful to have them supporting us. And what we're going to do now is have a word from our sponsor.
If you're studying for the PMP exam, how excited are you to memorize the 756 pages of the PMBOK? You see, when I was studying, I realized that cramming facts in my head wasn't only not going to help me pass, but it wasn't going to make me a better project manager. So I abandoned what the experts told me, and I created a method that delivered an above-target score without memorizing a thing. You heard me, memorizing nothing. The power of my method is in 3 simple changes that help you make and cement all the connections you need to ace the exam's situational questions. I've distilled my method into a book, e-course, simulator, and training class that transforms how you or your team learn PMP. My name is Scott Payne, and I want you to be successful in the PMP exam. Go to pmmasterprep.com and learn how my PMP training method works, and use the code PMO Joe to receive 20% off every product that will make you battle ready for the PMP exam.
So it's so great to have Scott and the PM Master Prep team joining us, and what a fantastic offer as well. 20% off for our listeners. Visit pmmasterprep.com, use the code PMO Joe, and we're so excited to have Scott and the team on board. Also, PMO Squad is a sponsor of our show, and the PMO Squad is home of the purpose-driven PMO. Most organizations start with the what and the how of project management, but with the purpose-driven PMO, the PMO Squad focuses on the why. The purpose-driven PMO empowers people to deliver results. Visit thepmosquad.com to learn more about the purpose-driven PMO. Also want to take a moment to thank everyone at the Southwestern Ontario, Canada chapter of PMI. I was out there last week to be a keynote speaker for their 16th annual symposium. Met some old friends such as Hussein Banakawala, and also made some future acquaintances that I think will be joining us as guests. So really appreciate the time out there, and thank you so much for having me. Also, one note, on June 3rd, Eric Wright from Vets to PM will be joining me, and the two of us will be out at Luke Air Force Base talking with them about transitioning from military duty into the civilian project management world. So if you're local here in Phoenix and want to catch Dr. Eric Wright or myself, we'll be together on June 3rd. A reminder to everybody that we are a live radio show. We're coming in at 1 o'clock today, a 2-hour time difference, because we have a guest joining us from Australia. We're super excited. But we are live, so we can take questions from you via Twitter. So if you have a question for any of the guests, please tweet them in, tag them with hashtag PMO Joe, and we'll be able to get to them live on air. So I am beyond excited today for our topic and our guests. We have 3 great leaders with us, Elise Stevens, Kornelia Homewood, and Lynda Stanton. Thank you all for being with us. And Elise, I wanted to go over to you, if you can introduce yourself to the audience, listeners, and just share a little bit about who you are and what you've got going on.
Well, thank you, Joe. It's so exciting to be on your show today. And I'm coming live from Brisbane, Australia, which is another day ahead, which is hard to wrap your mind around sometimes.
Happy Friday.
Yeah, it is Happy Friday. So I am an advocate for women in project management, and what that means is I'm all about giving women a platform, the knowledge, the skills, whatever they need to be successful project managers and to lift their visibility. And one of the ways that I do that is that I hold a yearly Celebrating Women in Project Management initiative. And this year it was 100 fabulous women submitted their profiles, and next year I'm going to grow that. I'm just not sure how.
Well, I think what we're really fortunate about today, obviously having you and hearing the Australian birds in the background makes me wish I was there with you, right? We have two of the people that you feature, two of the women you had featured in your initiative are with us as well. One, Lynda Stanton. Welcome back, Lynda. You've been on before.
Hi there. Great to be back.
And if you can, just share a little bit with our audience about you and what you've been up to since you were on last.
Oh, yeah, for sure. So my name is Lynda. I am the director of the PMO for a local software company called WebPT. We're a SaaS EMR for individuals in the therapy space, so PTs, OTs, speech language pathologists. My role there is all of the internal fun cross-departmental initiatives. So I get to do all of the fun stuff with all of my awesome coworkers at WebPT. So what have I been up to in the last year? And I looked because I couldn't remember the date I was here. So it's been just a little bit over a year. So a lot has been going on. We've obviously had a lot at work, but also a lot personally. I am pretty active in the animal advocacy realm. So I do a lot of volunteering with Arizona Animal Welfare League and stuff like that. Also volunteer with PMI. And this past weekend, I became a certified Scrum Master. So
congratulations.
Been pretty busy.
That's awesome. Well, welcome back. And Kornelia Homewood, thank you so much for being with us. And we've got a connection to you. A former boss was on last episode, and a current boss was on many episodes back. So welcome.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a small world. So my name is Kornelia. I'm a PPM consultant, and so supporting clients from discovery through implementation of their PPM initiatives. I've coached PMs, I've helped build PMOs, and then I've managed projects in technology, finance, higher education, and the creative arts. I'm also a PMP. I have my professional Scrum Master, so loving the agile world there. And then I also have my master's in project management from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University.
That's awesome. Thank you so much for being on. And today, really, the topic is celebrating women in project management, right? Getting the three of you together is, I think, a bit of a coup for me, and I appreciate all of you making yourselves available. And that's really what I want to talk about. Elise, you had mentioned 100 women. I think 24 or 25 different countries were featured this past year. How did you come up with this idea, and what has been the kind of the impact of it?
How all this came about is that in 2017, a very well-connected woman here in Australia called Dr. Kirsten Ferguson had a year of celebrating women, 365 days, 2 profiles a day. And I was blown away by what she was trying to do in raising the profile of women. And so I was looking at that and I was thinking, hey, I can do that for women in project management. And the reason I thought that there was a need was that I looked around and our voices just weren't there. Very few women were blogging. They were hardly ever on podcasts. There were very few running podcasts of their own. And I just felt that if we're not visible, then our voices aren't being heard, and then we're not being part of the community and influencing the way we deliver projects. And this is why Celebrating Women in Project Management was born. So the first year I did, 50 fabulous women submitted their profiles, and I thought, okay, I know how to do this, and I can improve upon this. And so I did 100 this year, and so I've been really pleased with the response.
Has anything surprised you, like since you started?
Yes, the thing that surprised me is the generosity of people in the PMI community, and for sharing and commenting and celebrating people that you work with. I know that one person I know of here in Brisbane, I saw that people that she worked with said, you do a fabulous job, and, we think you're a great project manager. And I just thought that it was a great way to get feedback from the people we work with or that we've worked with previously. I was surprised by the diversity of reasons about how we can help other women and why we enjoy being project managers.
I think it's kind of interesting to be able to, again, I'm the one man in the room, right? So it's hard for me to understand and appreciate, obviously, why it's important to have this. But having had other guests previously who are on the show who are women, and they talked about some of the challenges that they've had as women in project management. When I saw you were doing your initiative, I said, I knew I need to bring this topic on and talk about it. Obviously I can't, but I'm so excited to have all of you talk about this. So, Lynda, what did this mean to you, and why did you want to participate?
I thought it was a really unique initiative and kind of an interesting time for me. I have found I love what I do, but I found at times it can be a little bit isolating sometimes because you're typically not on a team of 50 project managers. It's one project manager and a bunch of other individuals. So I like to find ways where I can reach out to other project managers just so you can kind of talk about your day to day and some other challenges you have. But in my past, I haven't really found a lot of other women project managers. There are some, don't get me wrong. So it was kind of nice to see the focus on that, and see that there are a lot of us out there.
And Kornelia, how about you? What drew you to this?
So at the time that I learned about the initiative, we had a small team of project managers, and one of the women was moving on. So we were replacing her, and we were doing interviews, and I was looking through all of the applicants, and the majority of them were men. And I was thinking, where are all the women? So, and because, there's more applicant men than there's more men being interviewed. It's just statistics. So for me, it just was the right timing to feel like, hey, we got to get our names out there. And I've been surprised by how many women have been featured. It's just been phenomenal to know that we're all out there.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously in the world, right, there's the whole Me Too movement, and there's a lot of
Right.
social consciousness going on right now, and understanding the inequalities between the sexes in the workplace and elsewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's great to have. Has this been empowering? Has it been liberating? What's kind of the tangential experience that's come from this?
For me, I think it's really just more empowering. I don't know about liberating or anything else. I've always felt, respected most of the time especially in my current role. But I think it's just great to know that there's, power in numbers, and there's a lot of people out there who maybe are going through the same things or have had similar experiences in the past. And then it's also a great way, Elise's platform. I don't know that Kornelia and I would have reached out to each other or met otherwise. And so, it's nice to have that platform and a way to see other people and be able to reach out to them.
Yeah, and I think when I look through the list, Naomi Cayetti, Ruth Pierce, Lynda, yourself, and obviously Kornelia now on the show. Jan Schiller's been on the show. So there were several, Dana Brownlee, I think, several folks that were on our show. And I said, man, I feel good about me trying to help spread this message and get it out there. Elise, tell us a little bit more about what you do in your podcast and your reach. You're in Australia, and we're so thankful to have you join us. But in America, maybe we learn about you through social media, but we don't have that direct day-to-day connection because of the distance. So just share a little bit more about what you do and how you get your message out there.
Well, I started off podcasting because I felt that I was unable to write a blog post every week. And so I thought, I'd like to talk, so I'll just record a podcast. And then the podcast evolved. And because women's voices weren't there, I always aimed to have a lot of women being interviewed on the podcast. It's really important to me that I provide a forum, a medium, for women to share their voices on topics about project management or leadership or, delivering great value to organizations. And the podcast is my vehicle to help improve that, lift that visibility, because I know that when I talk to women about coming on the show or putting their profiles, a lot of them are like, oh, I'm not sure about that. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that, I've done enough. Have I really done enough to be able to put myself out there more, which surprises me. And one of the people this year, she wrote me a note via LinkedIn and said, Elise, I really love your initiative. I finally gathered up enough courage to put myself up this year. I saw it last year, but I felt that I wasn't ready to do that. And I just think that if I can provide a mechanism or a platform, that inspires women to take a small risk and put themselves out there more, then that encourages other women to put themselves out there a bit more and get comfortable with being more visible. And the more visible women are, the more they see project management as a great career and have great opportunities and hopefully more applicants for roles, for project management roles.
Yeah, and just looking through, what I love about the initiative is the questions that you've asked and the responses you get back. Right? You get to learn the people. It's not just here's an initiative, right? You actually meet them. And Kornelia, what kind of struck me when I looked at your profile you put out there is that 3 different women as mentors really have helped shape your career. Can you talk about them and how that happened?
Yeah, so when I was doing my master's degree, we had to research industry, trends and just industry resources available. And so I was Googling and then, project management, and then I typed woman in there, just crossing my fingers and hoping. And at the time, Elizabeth Heron came up, and her blog is A Girl's Guide to Project Management. And I can't tell you how many times I have thrown that link to another woman, especially early on in their project management career, because that was the first time that I saw a woman just being open about, what we experience. And her blogs do resonate to a little bit more of a softer side that I had seen. A lot of the other project management blogs tend to be, more technical about the methodology, but hers, she was interviewing women about, what's it like? And so they spoke about what it's like to be a woman, which sometimes we face some pretty extraordinary challenges that I don't know that men are completely aware of, the way that we are, the perception of what's being communicated to us. So I just really valued that. The other 2 that I listed is Kate Anderson. So she's a co-host on the PM Happy Hour. And the way that I found that podcast was she had a episode of Sassy and Assertive, and it was her and the male co-host Kim, and she was talking to him about, have you ever experienced this? And he was like bewildered by what she had been experienced, just having to think about, I'm going into a really important meeting, and what would most people do? They would prepare their notes, they'd make sure their PowerPoint presentation, but as a woman, you're like, okay, am I wearing the right thing? Am I sending the right message, visually? So the fact that we have to, and I can't remember Kim's exact quote, but he said something about like, gosh, what an added distraction. It's like, I would love to just be able to focus on my meeting. I don't want to think about, okay, is my hair up making me look younger? Is my hair down making me look older or tired? That kind of stuff. And then, Joe, to your last point, my third one was Amanda Souders. And I don't honestly know if she knows that I even posted her, and I want to reach out and let her know, because I think that's the other important thing for women to realize is how many people are looking up to you that you don't even know. And so Amanda was a VP at Infusionsoft, and I remember every single meeting I was in, she had her laptop closed and she was focusing on every single person in the room. And that to me just was so amazing. And she had some very hard conversations with CEOs that I was in the room with because I was a project manager and they were part of my projects. And the way that she spoke authentically about her worries was something that I just I had like doe eyes of like, oh my gosh, you can be a VP woman and you can be vulnerable.
And speaking of women leaders, of course, Lynda, you work for an organization that has a powerhouse woman CEO and founder.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about how that's been important in your life and how it works at WebPT.
Yeah, it was one of the things that drew me to WebPT. When I was leaving my last role, I enjoyed the company I worked for, but I didn't particularly like traveling all of the time. So I was looking for a company. I didn't want to just leave for another job, right? So it had to be, because I was at such a great company, it had to be the exact right position. And WebPT fit all of those pieces for me. And just kind of the cherry on top was that we had a female founder, and our CEO is a woman. It's been neat to kind of watch them navigate, kind of that next level. The rest of our senior team, other than our founder and the CEO, are men. And so it's kind of interesting to watch them interact in that environment. how they portray themselves to the entire organization. So it's kind of nice to have people like that to look up to. I actually, now that we're kind of sitting here talking about it, and when I had to fill that out, I realized while I've worked with some great women over the years, I haven't had anyone kind of at that level that I've worked with so closely that I've been able to kind of look up to and see how they navigate that world. So it's been kind of nice. And I unfortunately feel like maybe I'm in a little bit of a rare position to have that luxury, which I think is kind of one of the challenges that we face.
And again, go ahead, Elise.
It is. And that's why visibility is so important. So when you read the McKinsey reports and the Deloitte Access reports here in Australia about women CEOs and senior leadership reports, and about the lack, especially here in Australia, the lack of women at senior leadership positions, then if you can't see someone, how can you're taking away if she can do it and she's able to do these things, then I can do that as well. And I think that that's one of the real drivers behind what I was trying to do, is about if we improve our visibility, then we're going to get more speaking gigs at PMI conferences, or we're going to encourage women to put themselves forward for project management awards, or we're going to encourage women to become leaders of great infrastructure projects. And having that visibility is such an important thing, but it starts with giving people a forum. But let's see all the women in senior leadership positions within organisations, not just within project management. And this is such a company by company situation that some organisations are really female friendly and others are quite toxic. It's really hard to pick them.
So what can we do to encourage more women to share, right? It's, again, I'm have the outside perspective here, and I'm a bit like Kim, right? As you mentioned from the podcast, is, I've never had to think about what I'm wearing when I go into a meeting. So how do we help educate us men to understand that we need to be aware of how we communicate and project management roles and interviews and all the stuff that you're all addressing today? Here's your platform. Here's a voice to be able to share that and help educate some of us men out there who've been in the industry a while, but just never really thought about it this way.
At a former place that I worked, we actually had a women's network. It was really interesting because it failed. And I think the reason that it failed was because when they first were starting the initiative, they said, okay, our men are all senior, or the senior leadership was all men. And so they're like, if we want support for a budget and different kinds of resources for this, we need to include them. And there was the founding group of women were like, absolutely not. Do not include them. And I think that's such a shame. So, to your point, part of the whole conversation is having everybody involved in the conversation and being able to speak, be able to speak up. It's not always easy to, I think, as a woman to say, like, that was inappropriate. I don't know if that's the right way to say it, but just to be like, that statement kind of made me uncomfortable, and just to be able to start to bring it to the table. I think that's one of the things you mentioned the Me Too movement's doing, is people are starting to come out of the woodworks and just being able to speak up.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's definitely important to be able to speak up. Obviously, in the appropriate setting, don't call people out. But that could be the female in me talking. I know for me, I think what you're saying, bringing men to the table. So don't just isolate ourselves as women is really important. I've done a decent amount of networking, and I have focused on like women's networking, and I love this initiative. But our CEO, WebPT CEO Nancy Ham, was recently interviewed, and I read her interview, and she's very much pro networking. But she said something that I really hadn't thought about previously. And she said, make sure you're not just networking with women, you're networking with men as well. And while I do some of that, I think that's really important now, kind of reflecting on it, especially what you said, is it's great to have visibility within ourselves as women, but in order for us to kind of break down those barriers, we're going to have to put ourselves out there with everybody and be visible with everybody to, at some point, ultimately that will just be the norm. and no one will be treated differently or talked about differently.
And Elise, you just posted something about the queen bee. So I think that's something really important as well. As Elise, you mentioned that you're giving us the medium to communicate and to have, I love on your Facebook group, you have self-promotion. I think the other thing that we should also focus on is just promoting other women. So on LinkedIn, I've noticed lately that they have this kudos praise thing that you can do, and just, overtake the queen bees by promoting all of the great thing that we're doing. There's so many women that I've run into that, I think someone earlier mentioned the inner imposter. The first time I heard about that, I was at a women's conference, and to have it have a name meant so much to me. And so to know that that wasn't, something just personal, everybody was feeling that. And so the woman that was giving the presentation, she said right before a meeting, she would text her best friend and say, hey, I'm going into our meeting. And her friend would text back, you got it, And so that would have never crossed my mind. But even now, I'm sure a lot of organizations have Slack. I'll Slack my, my colleagues and be like, hey, I'm going into a really hard meeting. And just to have them have your back, you're going to rock this. It's just, I don't know. It's just so important to continue to rise everybody up with you in this promotion.
And be generous. Yeah. So one of the unexpected outcomes or unexpected things with the Celebrating Women in Project Management was that by being generous with other women and celebrating other women, that I was able to raise my profile as well. So it wasn't about me. It was about how great these other women were, and being able to highlight that, I think, really gives you an inner glow, if you like, but also it enables you to not be seen as, me. Just on the other point about what we can do, I think that when we see low numbers of women in organisations, everyone needs to think about why this is happening and start to question it. I was working somewhere and I said, where are all the women in this group of project managers? And the guy I was working with went, what do you mean? And I said, well, where are they? And he went, it was like I was asking a foreign question. And I said, well, where are they? He goes, I don't understand what you're talking about. He said, well, one's on maternity leave and one's here. And I'm going, so out of 30 project managers, you've got 2 women, one of whom's on maternity leave. And he's like, oh, and then it was totally forgotten. But no one was doing anything to think about improving the diversity of project managers, because the diversity is so important, to have diversity of thought, diversity of approach, and because that is really about what it's important about, delivering great outcomes for our customers, and by doing that, by thinking about new innovative ways. And I think that diversity is so important.
I think one of the things that I'm hearing, right, with the male perspective, is really the initiative seems to be about inclusion and not exclusion. You're not saying exclude men from the conversation. It's actually include them in the conversation to make them be more aware. Does that tie in, Elise? Was that kind of an intent, or maybe a secondary benefit that may have come out of this?
Yeah. Yes, most definitely. And I have to share a funny story with you, because I was on the PMI chat room thing, or just looking at something about women's pay in project management. And there was this whole conversation between a whole group of men saying what a load of baloney it was that there was a gender pay gap. And what struck me as funny about that was that men were talking about women's pay. I'm like, and what would you know?
Yeah, how would they know? Yeah.
And I'm like, truly, you can't see the irony of this conversation.
Well, it's interesting to hear the discussion, and obviously I feel like I just need to pull back, right? and you all talk, but it's great to understand and have this discussion, because we need to your point, Elise, right? My whole show was started to give project management leaders a voice in our industry to share their story, right? That's kind of our tagline. But I didn't consciously think it was that women or is that men. It was just leaders. And I've always seen it as both. And if you go through my guest list, it's probably it may even be more women than men that we've had on the show. So then when I saw this, it was fascinating. So again, from your perspectives, what are some of the benefits that we think that we can get out of this initiative? And as it continues to grow, right? I think it's going to snowball, like Elise is saying, and it's going to continue to grow. What the diversity of thought, obviously, that Elise just mentioned, but what are some of the other benefits that we're going to get out of this?
I think there's a couple. One, obviously, the diversity and just visibility in general to the women in project management. One, for myself as a woman in project management, to have other people that I can reach out to. The second one, I think, is that we can start talking about some of the things that maybe we're not talking about openly, like you were talking earlier, Kornelia, about imposter syndrome. And so that's something that I've struggled with early in my career. I'd like to say more than half of the time I don't struggle with that now. So I think that's definitely an improvement. But in my profile, I said some of the best advice that I had received was believe in yourself. I know early on in my career, I would kind of question, am I worthy to be here? Have I done what I need to do to get to this space? And kind of looking back on it, it doesn't, I was there, capitalize on that experience. Don't necessarily ask all the million questions as to why you're there, and work really hard to keep going and get to the next level. And don't just kind of sit back, and wait for people to come for you. So I think that for me, like you're saying, it was kind of like a light bulb moment for you when you heard someone talking about it. It was very much the same for me, because I was like, oh, other people feel this way. It's not just me. I'm not the only person who's kind of out of place. And when I got that advice, and honestly, I don't remember who gave it to me, unfortunately. So if you're out there and listening, this shout out to you. But it's something that really stuck with me. And ever since I've kind of had that mind shift where I believe in myself, I believe I can do these things, the doors started kind of opening. And because I was no longer the one standing in my way. And I think that was just kind of a valuable lesson for me. And obviously I still struggle with it from time to time, and it'll probably never go away fully, but it helps me kind of get through those things. And I think that, kind of tying back to your question, I think those types of conversations are the ones that we need to be having while also raising our profiles and being more visible.
I think for me, because of the time zone, when the initiative was going on, I would wake up every single day to a new post. That was like the most, like my alarm clock goes off and then see which woman was being featured today.
So was I, by the way.
Yeah. And so for me, it was just, I don't know, it's like this extraordinary celebration. I can't even put it into words how amazing it was for me just to be able to share and all these achievements for women. And even to be completely honest, when I'm having a hard day, like I'll go to her site, Elise's site, and be like, oh man, look at all these people that are doing amazing things. And beyond women, there's a multitude of people in their careers. So I can look back at like the younger people and feel like, okay, like, how can I help a person that, might be sitting next to me that is in this same person's shoes? Or for me, as I grow in my career, then I'm looking at the people that, they have 15, 20 years of experience, and how can I grow up to be them? So I think that it's so neat that it's out there on the internet to Google and to be inspired. The other thing that I thought was, so again, I appreciate Elise's giving us the medium for self-promo, because that has never been something that I have really been, I might tap myself on the back, read my resume sometimes. But what I found is, so I'm professional on LinkedIn, I put all my certs, but I'm actually pretty, silly on Facebook. I'll just admit it. I have a bubbly personality, so my Facebook is my friends, my family. I post a lot of yarn and cat photos, But I posted my women in project management profile, and I'll be honest, the post I said is like, my life is more than puppies and rainbows. I'm actually a professional woman. And
I think I said the same thing.
Yeah. And my 17-year-old cousin, I've only met her once, but she shared it and she was like, that's my cousin Hart. And she's like getting ready to choose, she's graduating high school and she's choosing what she wants to be in her life. And so it was just so like, it made me stop to think like, I'm celebrating all these women, but I mean, some of these women are celebrating me, and then of course my mom shares it, my grandma shares it. And then I'm like, there's this like trickle or ripple effect, of just being celebrated. So it's just, I don't know, it just feels awesome.
And through this exercise, I'm learning a lot of things. Like I didn't know what a fiber artist was until I met Kornelia. So she shared that with me. So thank you for that. And imposter syndrome, right? I'm not familiar with this, right? So hearing this on the show today has been helpful. And I can take a moment in time to think about this as you're all talking and put me in my circle of friends. In the group that I grew up with in project management, and those memories pretty much are the good old boys network, right? Mm-hmm. And I can just hear them say, Joe, you're having a show celebrating women. Why are you doing that? Right? And unfortunately, I think that's just the mindset that's out there. And I hate to admit that, but I think that's just reality. So what do we learn from this show, right? How do we take this and help that network of people that may have been the traditional way that men thought and poo-pooed this message and made it insignificant to actually celebrate it like Kornelia just said?
I think that the thing that you're doing is that either consciously or unconsciously, you've got about 50-50 women and men on your show. And I think that having that balanced view is doing its job. It's normal to have a woman on your show, a woman's voice talking about risks or issues or stakeholder engagement, running PMOs, whatever the topic. It just shows to anyone that's listening and in the world of social media that this is the normal. And I think that having that balanced view is so important. And that's the theme of International Women's Day this year, is better balance. And I think that we can have better balance in our social media, encouraging more women to put themselves out there. And that then translates into people questioning the diversity of the team, of their project management team. And I think that once we start questioning these things, and there's this whole thing about gender quotas or different things, and it's like, can we not have everyone the same? I was talking to someone the other day and they were telling me about a big infrastructure company here in Australia, and it's the same. Everyone on the ELT and SLT is blonde, blue-eye, male, Australian or English. So you tell me about diversity of thought in that organisation.
And again, I brought up kind of Me Too movement as well. And I always try to make the show basic and not be project management lingo. So we recently saw Avengers Endgame, probably like the rest of the world. And I hope I don't spoil it for anybody, so stop listening for about a minute if you do. But you think back to this conversation and you say, hey, Black Widow sacrificed instead of Hawkeye, and that never would have happened probably 20 years ago because it was the man who would have sacrificed himself. I just think it's becoming more popular. It's becoming more the norm, maybe not the norm, but it may be more accepted. And in these discussions, I guess I'm glad to be a part of it just to make sure that it's out there. Thinking about social, cultural activities and outside the project management realm, because our lives do include work, right? The work-life balance. How is this part of work-life balance, right? And how does that come into play?
Well, I think that everyone needs flexible working, because the groups that really suffer from coming back into project management or having great project management careers are women with children. And there's still a perception, unfortunately, that it's a woman's choice to have children. And so if she's choosing to have children, then it's her career that needs to be paused. And it's like, no, I thought it was a family's view to have a child, and but workplaces, especially here in Australia, aren't very, there are some organisations that are good, but aren't very family-friendly, flexible. But men need that flexibility as well. And we shouldn't be afraid to say, hey, I've got to go and pick up children, and it shouldn't be just the woman doing it, but also the man. And I think that by having better diversity, it actually helps men as well.
Lynda, Kornelia, thoughts on that as well?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. I think having a flexible schedule, people are more likely going to perform better as well. Just because, there really is no separation from work in your life. Everything all kind of collides, as best, at least for me, the best I've ever tried to separate them. It doesn't work out that way. So, work to me is very important, and it is definitely a big part of my life. But I definitely want the flexibility to be involved in other things. And don't want to necessarily, be looked at differently if I need to do that or need to do something from a family perspective.
Yeah, I think this for me I have a hard time with the gender paradigm here because, I'm in my mid-30s and my husband and I aren't going to have kids. We've made that decision. And so I don't think that, as a woman that doesn't have kids, that I should work anymore. You know what I mean? So I think for me, when you talk about family and life balance and work balance, it's just being able to, have boundaries and be able to spend time with what continues to give you strength. I was listening to a podcast that was talking about strengths and weaknesses, and they were talking about the strengths are the things that keep you going. And so that's what you should focus on. So sometimes, I have time for work, and sometimes I will work more hours, you know what I mean? But that shouldn't be taken as I'm sacrificing my life for my career or anything. So I have a hard time with the gender diversion on that because I think men should get just as much paternity time, So, but I did want to go back to your talk about the Avengers.
Yeah. Yeah, we could talk all day about that topic too.
There was a podcast I stumbled on, and I'm going to butcher the name, but I want to say it's called the Benchel test. And so there's this test within movies, and they run it through this algorithm or something, and it scores if two women are in a scene and whether or not they're talking to each other and whether or not they're talking about a man. So I just thought that was so interesting. And so, to your point, it's been so amazing for me to see Wonder Woman, to see these strong female leads. And I love the scene in Wonder Woman where she's walking into a room full of men and he's like, you can't go in there. She's like, why not? So sometimes it's her ignorance of an American culture where the men are dominating, was actually very enlightening because it's, and I wrote this in my profile is I was having this conversation about, men versus women to a man, and he's like, honest to God, sometimes I don't notice that you're the only woman in the room, so sometimes I feel we put all this pressure of oh, I'm the only one sitting here. And to your point, I've been brought to the table. I need to just own that. So don't, as a woman, I try never to start a sentence with, as a woman, I blah, blah, blah. It's as a professional, I blah, blah, blah,
Mm-hmm. And I think, again, because I'll keep going back to the Avengers, but at the kind of the beginning of that movie, we see Iron Man is essentially going to die, right? He's just floating in space, and who saves him? Mm-hmm. Captain Marvel, the woman, comes to the rescue and saves him. And again, I don't think... and maybe kudos to Marvel for doing this intentionally or unintentionally. I think probably intentionally, having Captain Marvel be a woman and letting the world of young women out there have a role model to look up to. Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure in the project management space we have the same thing. And Elise, you say next year is bigger, stronger, faster, right? It's going to get better. What does next year look like for the initiative?
I'm still ruminating on that at the moment. I've got to find something that's a good balance between what I can achieve without killing myself and encouraging women to participate. And I think that that's the big thing, is that it takes a lot of good effort to connect with women and encourage them to share their profiles. But it's not just a case, unfortunately, of putting the form up and women flock to it and go, yes, yes. So it takes a bit of work. So I've got to balance what I need to do to make it successful and and how I can do that within the time I have available.
And I'm brainstorming on the fly here. But as it continues to grow and expand, it's almost because there's so many countries represented, but even with that many, it's still a fraction of what's out there. What about almost brand ambassadors within different countries to go help you, right? To broaden your reach, like Kornelia here in the States being the person that's going to kind of rally the U.S. to capture 100 women in the U.S.
And that's something I haven't explored, but it's a great idea. I was talking to someone the other day, and she's going to Iran. She's Iranian herself, and she's going to Iran, and she's going to try and rally the women in project management there, because they've got a very patriarchal society over there, and the same in Brazil. Vanessa's doing a great job with her Elise project to get certification for 100 women, and but very patriarchal society. So highlighting women in these countries and showing them what is achievable is a great way to encourage more women. And so it is about getting that brand ambassador thing going. Great idea. Thank you, Joe.
Well, we'll see. And I'm always here to help out as necessary. Going back to the profiles, Lynda, on yours, one of the questions is the most valuable advice I'd ever been given is don't doubt yourself. Yeah. Can you help us understand that?
Yeah, for sure. So kind of going back to that imposter syndrome, especially as project managers, right? So earlier I was saying I feel like throughout my career I've been a little bit isolated from a project management perspective, because not in a bad way, it's just kind of the nature of the job, right? So you may be on a large project where there are several project managers, but you could be on a medium sized project or even a large project where you're the only project manager. So you're kind of thrust on the team with all these people who are specialists in whatever they're doing, whatever that project is. So you don't necessarily have someone with you to kind of talk about. So there's that isolation piece. And then I've rarely done the same project twice. I don't think anyone really has. So I'm constantly thrust in situations where I really maybe don't have prior experience. That's part of what I love about it, but that can also be a little bit daunting, right? And so early on in my career, I would maybe kind of question, am I the right person for this? Do I have the right experience? Shouldn't someone who's done this 50 times be here instead of me? But I learned kind of early on that, I can't think like that. That's not productive for me, and it doesn't allow me to be the best employee or, just person in general that I can be. So learning not to doubt myself. So anytime I'm thrust in kind of a situation where I've never had to do it before, my inner voice might creep up and say, oh, how are you going to do this? But, come back and say, I know I can do this. I've gotten through all of these other things before. I am the right person for this. I think there's a TED Talk, we watched it at work the other day, and by Amy Cuddy, I believe is her name, where she says, fake it till you become it. Kind of what I started doing early on. And then at some point you just kind of become it and believe in yourself. So definitely, as best you can, stop questioning yourself if you're doing that, and just believe that you're the right person for the job and you're going to get it done.
Well, I know, again, Elise has this great initiative that's going, and you two all the way over here in Arizona have been featured in there, but you really hadn't had an opportunity to interact with Elise directly before. So I don't know is there anything you want to say to Elise now that you're here with her?
For me, obviously I want to continue to stay connected virtually. But just kind of thank you. Thank you for having this idea. I think it comes down to, being creative and thinking of that to try to elevate, those of us who maybe aren't the most creative, because I would have just kept my head down and kept working, right? So it's kind of nice to see people who are thought leaders in that space, and I'm very grateful to be included.
Yeah, I definitely, I mirror that 100%. I have so much gratitude for you giving us a medium to have self-promotion, because there's no way I would have started a website and been like, hey, my name's Kornelia, I'm pretty cool, but I feel like, Elise, thank you so much. And again, I don't know how often you realize this, but I'm on that website so much. Just like I said, if I'm having a bad day, there was this show I watched a long time. It was Oprah, but so this woman had bought Oprah's shoes on a auction, and so she bought Oprah's shoes, and she went on to Oprah's show and in the guest, and she's like, I bought your shoes. And Oprah's thinking like, well, that's weird. Why are you wearing my shoes? And she's like, when I stand in your shoes, I have your confidence. And so that for me is just reading those profiles is just, all of these women, they've accomplished so many things. And so I appreciate all of the hard work that you've done to collect it. And I really hope that this initiative continues for many years.
Well, my heart is bursting. Because it is so nice. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to meet fantastic women like you and to provide a platform that allows you to use it to increase your visibility. And, so for that and for all the profiles you shared and commented, it means a lot. It really means a lot to all the women and others in project management. So thank you. Thank you for being in it and championing it and encouraging other women who have done fabulous things to submit their profiles.
And also, Elise, you've actually participated, or you're not just organizing this, your profile is out there as well. And I love the question is your advice for women on finding success as a project manager. And your answer was, be yourself, believe in your abilities, wear as much color as you want, and wear it in confidence. And I thought we knew who you were based on that answer. So thank you so much for that.
Years ago I was working in a role and, I wear a lot of color. And the woman that was in charge, I got lots of hair, there's a lot going on with my hair. I wear a lot of color. And the woman that was in charge had very short hair. She still had a wardrobe that came out of Dynasty. And she looked at me and it annoyed her because she was very structured. She looked very structured. She had the compendium going on. She looked at me and she couldn't understand how someone that wore a lot of color and had a lot of hair, a lot of uncontrolled hair, could deliver successful outcomes. And it perplexed her, and she really didn't like me that much. But she had to concede that I got the job done. And I think that there's this pressure to be normalized, that we all fit into the same cookie cutter. But what makes us individuals is what makes us great project managers, I think.
And so powerful. And one last spoiler alert. It has nothing to do with Avengers, but this time Game of Thrones.
Oh, yeah.
How cool was it that the badass at the end was Arya Stark killing the Night King?
Yes.
Right? That was so awesome. If it had been Jon Snow, it would have ruined the show. So I'm glad that they had to be Arya Stark.
I'm going to have to be left out of this conversation because I don't. I'm like the only person left.
That's probably true. Well, it's again, as with all shows, right? I mean, the time flies. We're basically up against our hour here. And Elise, Lynda, and Kornelia, I want to thank you so much for being on the show and helping to bring enlightenment to me and to be able to understand this initiative a little bit better and be able to appreciate it a little more. And I want to give you a chance to share with the audience one last thoughts that you have, how they can get in touch with you or any information you want to share with them. So Elise, we'll start with you. Anything that you want to share with the audience before we sign off?
I am so thrilled to be able to chat with Kornelia and Lynda and understand why the platform and the initiative spoke to them. So that's been really, really cool. And, I'm just so pleased that women find it a great way to take a little risk and to be a bit more visible. So my heart is bursting at the moment. And how people can get in contact with me is on LinkedIn. But my message is that for 2020, think about pushing yourself out there a bit more and submitting your profile, because you've done fabulous things and you've got something to share to inspire others.
Thank you so much for being on, and really appreciate you. With the time difference, I know it's very early in Australia. Thank you for starting your day with us. Mm-hmm. And Lynda, give you a chance as well.
Yeah. I just want to say thank you guys for including us in this initiative, and for Joe for including us in the show. It's been fun to be back. And this is such a great platform. So is Elise's initiative as well. Anyone who wants to reach out to me, you can do so on LinkedIn.
Great. Thank you so much, Lynda. I think you're maybe our second or third returning guest. So it's glad to have you back with us. Yeah. And Kornelia.
Yeah. Again, thank you for having us, and thank you to Elise. My last closing thought is just to make sure that, I know that we are all masters of our own destiny and own your own, self-promotion, but I would also just encourage other women to, let's kill that queen bee. If you see a woman that is, needing encouragement, I would just say, the first thing I do when I am looking up a company, I look to see who their leaders are. And more often than not, they're men. And so we need to build the pipeline. What do you do in marketing? You build your pipeline. So we need to build the pipeline of all the women leaders. And that starts with encouraging, the woman new in her career and giving her a chance. So, and you can find me on LinkedIn.
All right. Thank you so much, all of you, for sharing. And thank you to our listeners. This is a reminder, of course, that we are live the first and third Thursday each month. And our next show will be Thursday, May 16th. We're also going to be at 1 o'clock because we have another guest coming to us live from Australia. Julia Steele will be joining us along with Renee Campisi here locally in Phoenix. Also, these shows are being recorded. So please be sure to subscribe to the podcast, Project Management Office Hours, on Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Spreaker, Stitcher, whatever your podcast platform of choice is. Of course, thank you to our new sponsor, PM Master Prep, and also our existing sponsor, the PMO Squad. You can visit pmmasterprep.com, use promo code PMO Joe, and receive 20% off. Well, that's it for now. Office hours are closed. Until next time, I'm PMO Joe, and you've been listening to Project Management Office Hours.